Hi, I'm Jala. I went all by myself to Cyprus to investigate the peculiar geopolitical situation of the island. I met many journalists, professors, students, migrants, politicians, NGO representatives. This is the first of a series of videos in which I will expose the material that I have collected during my stay in Cyprus. This is part of the Varosha neighborhood, the only part which is not closed to the public and not guarded by Turkish soldiers. To get inside, we had to show our passports and our documents and also to have our cameras checked. Then we rented some beat-up bikes and we got around the neighborhood. The first thing that I thought when I set foot in Varosha was, well, I could be in Chernobyl. Okay, it's warmer and we are by the sea, but anyway, the buildings are abandoned, vegetation is growing everywhere, there are everywhere stray dogs and cats. There were always some guards who were supposed to check that people wouldn't go inside the buildings, but yeah, they're quite lazy guards. Paris was the first one to tell me something about Varosha. He told me that his mother had to flee from Varosha when she was 19 from day to night, and he also told me that going to Varosha for him was the biggest shock of his life. Of course, he suggested me to go to Varosha, and that's why I actually went there. Well, his mother was only one among the thousands and thousands who had to flee Varosha from day to night in '74 because of the military intervention of Turkey in northern Cyprus. And still, now there are 40,000 Turkish soldiers in the northern part of the island. But let's take a step back to understand how we got to this point and how Varosha became an actual ghost city. I will make another video about the history of Cyprus, the modern and contemporary history. In this video, I just want to focus on the events between 1963 and 1974 because these are the main events who led Turkey invade the northern part of Cyprus, and so these are the events that led to the abandonment of Varosha. Today, Cyprus should be a unitary and sovereign state, but since 1974 it has been divided in two parts, the northern part and the southern part, by the Green Line which was drawn in 1963. The northern part is the self-proclaimed Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which is the TRNC. The Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is not recognized by any state apart from Turkey. The southern part is the Republic of Cyprus, in which mainly Greek Cypriots live. To cross from one part to another, you have to show your documents at some checkpoints. In total, there are 7 checkpoints along the Green Line, which divides the island in two parts. The division of the island was mainly caused because of the fightings and the disagreements and also of the war between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, but again, I will speak better about this topic in the next video, the History of Cyprus video. Cyprus gained independence from the UK and became a sovereign state in 1960. Also in 1960, the Treaty of Guarantee, the Treaty of Alliance and the Constitution were signed. These 3 documents included some guarantees to protect the minority of Turkish Cypriots in the island. The Turkish Cypriots were more or less the 20% of the population of the island at that time. Also, these documents included the creation of some sort of guarantor state, which were the UK, Greece and Turkey. These states had to protect the territorial integrity, the security and the independence of Cyprus. Small spoiler, the UK still has some operational military bases in the territory of Cyprus. The constitution and the treaties didn't work so well. That's why in 1963 the tensions between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, who for the record have lived for many centuries in harmony together in the islands, well, these tensions just exploded. Now, there are many different views about what happened between 63 and 74. That's why if you talk to people on the streets, they will have some different versions of the facts between 63 and 74. And talking to these people, you will always understand how much the propaganda from both sides, from the Turkish side and from the Greek Cypriot nationalist side, have worked really well and have contributed to create a lot of historic revisionism about the facts between the 63 and the 74. So if you speak with some Greek Cypriot nationalists, they will say to you that anything has ever happened to Turkish Cypriots, that no one has ever harmed Turkish Cypriots, that the massacres against Turkish Cypriots have never happened, and that between 63 and 74 Turkish Cypriots voluntarily went to some sort of ghettos in the island. And they will also say to you that if you don't think that like that, you're just a slave of Turkish propaganda. On the other side, if you talk with some Turkish Cypriot nationalists or with some Turkish nationalists, they will say that no one has ever harmed a Greek Cypriot. They will also exaggerate the number of the casualties and of the victims in the events from 63 and 74, and they will also justify the military intervention of Turkey in the northern part of the island. I will try to be as objective and concise as possible and to put together all the information that I gained thanks to some conversations with journalists. So, since 1963, the Greek Cypriot nationalist group IOKA-B, which is different from the IOKA group that was a bit more ancient, they started carrying out some violent actions against the Turkish Cypriots, but also sometimes against Greek Cypriots who were moderate. They wanted to implement the enosis, that is, unify Cyprus with Greece, and also drive out all the Turkish Cypriots from the island. Their violence forced a lot of Turkish Cypriot families to go to the northern part of the island, abandoning their houses in the southern part of the island, or also to retire in some small ghettos or enclaves. In 74, the IOKA-B group, together with the colonials regime of Greece, tried to overthrow the legitimate government of Cyprus, which was headed by the Archbishop Makarios. And here you can see how much the church was and still is really powerful in Cyprus. They tried to overthrow the government and to put as the head of the state Samson, who was a man of the IOKA-B. Now, Turkey asked on the international scene to stop the coup d'etat, but anyone was willing to do something, really. So Turkey, also basing itself on the Treaty of Guarantee, decided to invade Cyprus. So that's why on the 20th of July, Turkey implemented the Attila I plan, and they landed in Kyrenia, which is a city in the northern part of Cyprus. Then 1 month later, with the operation Attila II, they also managed to conquer 1/3 of the territories of the island, which is quite a lot for only 1 month. Now, the legitimacy of the Turkish intervention, military intervention in northern Cyprus can be debated. There are a lot of different interpretations of the Treaty of Guarantee, but there is one thing which is really sure. Turkey couldn't, from an international law point of view, just invade one foreign country and stay there until now. And now there are 40,000 Turkish soldiers in the northern part of Cyprus. But now, going back to Varosha. Varosha is a neighborhood of Famagusta, which is a city on the eastern coast of Cyprus. Now, in the Turkey's military plans in 1974, it wasn't included to conquer Famagusta. Famagusta was a luxury tourism town. Even a lot of Hollywood stars would go there to enjoy the sea and to enjoy holidays. You can actually still see the carcasses of luxury hotels and luxury restaurants there. But when the news of the troops invading the northern part of Cyprus came to Famagusta, everyone, like Greek, Cypriot, civilians and tourists, they just abandoned Famagusta from day to night. This is also the case of Paris' mother. The Turkish Cypriots were living all together in a ghetto, which was the old town of Famagusta, and they just stayed there. Meanwhile, the Greek Cypriot army was all focused on the central part of the island to defend Nicosia. So what happened? The Turkish army just found a completely empty and rich city, which was Famagusta, and Turkey, together with the northern Cyprus authorities, they decided to not let anyone live in the quarter, in the neighborhood of Varosha, to use that neighborhood in the negotiations. Now, the negotiations have never found a solution, and that's why in the meanwhile the neighborhood Varosha was looted by the soldiers, by Turkish soldiers. When I say that the negotiations didn't find a solution, I mean that still now the island is divided in two parts. There is no two-state solution. There is not a federation state solution. That's why the northern part of Cyprus, the Tier Sea, is just considered as an occupied territory by Turkey. The situation remained quite static until 2020, because in 2020 some parts of Famagusta, some parts of Varosha were reopened to the public, and this happened after some declarations by the president of the Tier Sea and by Erdogan. And now we can really see how much Varosha is used as a bargaining chip in negotiations still nowadays, and also how it is actually used by the Tier Sea, but also by Erdogan, to show strength, to show power, to mock maybe a bit the Western states and the Republic of Cyprus, so the southern part of Cyprus. We can understand why Varosha is used as a bargaining chip, or at least it is used as a way to show off for Turkey and the Tier Sea, by analyzing two events, 2 points. The first one is the fact that Varosha is now a kind of amusement park. It is a dark tourism destination. The majority of tourists who go to Varosha, to the open part of Varosha, are Turkish, and they just go there to see an abandoned city. When, on the other hand, it's Greek Cypriots who go to Varosha to see the neighborhood, well, these people are quite heavily linked with the history of Varosha, maybe because they are the sons or daughters of people who had to flee from day to night from Varosha, or they are the people who actually had to abandon Varosha in 1974. Now, the fact that Varosha is used as a dark tourism destination, even if it's quite a painful thing to know for people who lived there, for Greek Cypriots who lived there until 1974, this doesn't really help the negotiations between the northern parts of Cyprus and the southern part of Cyprus. Then there is a maybe more serious fact which regards the issue of property. Well, the majority of people who own the properties in Varosha are Greek Cypriots who are not living there anymore since 1974. So these properties are owned by Greek Cypriots. That means that the TRNC or Turkey, they can't dispose of these properties, they can't dispose of these buildings because it's not property of the TRNC and they're not property of Turkey. Turkey and the TRNC, they can't really open or close or rent or buy or sell these kind of properties, these kind of buildings and houses which are in Varosha. That's why in 2020 the European Parliament asked the TRNC authorities to reconsider the decision of opening Varosha and making it become a kind of dark tourism destination. The European Parliament noticed and said that this decision, the decision of reopening parts of Varosha, was really against international law, but especially against the negotiations between the two parts. More in general, a lot of institutions such as the European Parliament, but also the UN and also the European Court of Human Rights and the Court of Justice of the European Union, all these institutions have underlined that the Turkey invasion of the northern part of Cyprus have not respected the Greek Cypriots' human rights, such as the right to have a property, the right to have and enjoy a property, the right to have a private life. But the TRNC authorities in Turkey, they actually seem to mock all these opinions of these European institutions. Not only they don't really allow Greek Cypriots to go back to their properties, but they also seem to be willing to send some properties that again are owned by Greek Cypriots or by other states and citizens, but properties that are not owned by the TRNC authorities or by Turkey. If you want another example to understand how Varosha can be used as a bargaining chip in negotiations, well, the TRNC authorities have asked the Republic of Cyprus authorities to recognize the Ercan airport, which is the only airport of the northern part of Cyprus, and in exchange, Varosha would have been given back to the Republic of Cyprus. This story is really interesting because the Ercan airport is not recognized by any state apart from Turkey. It is not even recognized by the International Civil Aviation Organization, and this means that the flights who come to the Ercan airport are only flights from Turkey, and the flights from Ercan airport can only go to Turkey. It is also interesting to notice that in the last few months the Ercan airport has been totally renovated and totally made really bigger and bigger and bigger with only Turkish money. But yeah, I will tell you about this story in the next video. Thanks for watching the video. Stay tuned to watch the next videos about Cyprus, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks.